Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Judy and I love travel, history, and finding out what makes people tick. Today we're going to meet Vincent Van Gogh, quiet, rowdy, thoughtful, foolish, kind, lucid, mad, impetuous, and mostly bankrupt. The man was an artistic genius despite all of this. Before we begin today, I want to advise you that this video will include references to Vincent's mental illness, possible alcoholism and drug abuse, and suicide, which some people may find disturbing. Any of my other travel videos may be a better choice for you. Now let's explore the life and work of Vincent van Gogh in Provence, which I think was the most productive period of his life. Today with me, the Armchair Traveler. Vincent van Gogh likely struggled with mental illness throughout his life, starting in his teenage years. His letters to his brother Theo reveal that he was aware of these struggles, and yet he was powerless to stop them. His life alternated between periods of productivity and despair, with moments of painful self-awareness. Throughout his short career, he constantly experimented with artistic styles. He didn't copy them, he adapted them and made them his own. He often repainted scenes and even reused canvases to save money while he was trying to do just that. Sorrow, shown here, is a charcoal drawing and is the image of a despairing woman, possibly reflecting his own mental and physical suffering. In 1883, Van Gogh moved to Nuenen in Holland to live with his family after a period of personal failure, relationships, finances, even his art. Here he witnessed rural poverty up close and firsthand, and he tried to depict what the life of poor peasants was really like. His early Dutch period, as they call it, was influenced by his time here, and it focused mainly on rural laborers, using dark, earthy tones and showing us the influence of Rembrandt, especially in the use of alternating light and shadow. The Potato Eaters dates from 1885 and is considered his first masterpiece. It portrays peasant life's harsh reality. The style was inspired by Rembrandt's use of light and dark, but unlike Rembrandt's refined version, Van Gogh's figures here are rough and expressive, emphasizing the hardship. Though he portrayed the hard life of his sitters, he also showed us that they could be happy and content. These people are shown sitting after dark with a lamp lighted, which meant they had enough money to afford oil for it and a plate full of food. Perhaps Vincent wanted the same contentment in his life. Despite his pride in the Potato Eaters, he struggled for commercial success and was never able to sell it. He soon moved on to the Royal Academy of Arts in Antwerp, where he received, or perhaps from his point of view, was subjected to rigid academic training. I don't think he much cared for it. This skull of a skeleton with a burning cigarette was painted a year or so afterwards, possibly as a satire or a rebellion against those academic norms. Some people interpret it as a comment on his health or self-destructive habits, and I think that's possible, but I also think the skull means whatever we want it. Vincent moved to Paris in 1886 to live with his brother Theo after that brief stay in Antwerp, where he struggled both financially and with his health. These challenges would dog him for the rest of his life. Theo was an art dealer, well known in Paris, and welcomed Vincent to Montmartre, where he lived, an artistic hub where he introduced Vincent to Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and their practitioners. This exposure drastically transformed his style, shifting from the dark, earthy tones of the Potato Eaters to brighter colors and looser brushstrokes under the influence of men like Monet, Pissarro, Toulouse-Lautrec, and even Cezanne. His vase with red gladiola, shown here, reflects this transition, moving away from the Rembrandt-inspired shadows of his Dutch period and echoing the floral still-life tradition of the 17th century Dutch Golden Age. Fritillaria in a copper vase further showcases his use of vibrant, contrasting colors. Van Gogh embraced not just Impressionist styles, but the belief in painting in the fresh air, capturing a scene on site rather than taking notes, making sketches, and then recreating in a studio. Photography was making exact representation in painting less necessary and was pushing artists toward more expressive styles. Vincent's self-portraits from this period also reveal his evolving use of color. The self-portrait in a straw hat from 1887 gives us warm tones suggesting summer, while the self-portrait in a gray felt hat from the winter of 1887-1888 features cool blue tones, perhaps reflecting the gloom of a Parisian winter. Seeking a less expensive lifestyle, he was totally dependent on his brother. Peace, fresh inspiration, and the ability to paint outdoors year-round, Van Gogh left for Arles. Like many of his Impressionist friends, Vincent developed a deep interest in Japanese art, particularly Japanese art prints. He collected hundreds of them and often recreated their composition, one example being his 1887 piece that he called The Courtesan. From Japanese woodblock prints, Vincent adopted bold outlines, flat colors, and asymmetrical compositions. In his letters, he often referred to Japan as an artistic utopia, calling it the land of blue and gay colors. This fascination might have influenced his decision eventually to move to Arles. Take a look at these two images. On the left, you see a reproduction of an original Japanese work, which is featured on the cover of a French illustrated weekly newspaper. On the right is Van Gogh's 1887 interpretation of the same image, The Courtesan, based on the original. Both images depict a Japanese woman, richly dressed, heavily made up, seemingly captured in mid-step, staring backward over her shoulder at us as if we were intruding on her personal space. The figures are almost identical in shape and posture, but Van Gogh's version stands out with much brighter colors. He also reimagined the background. While the original piece features cherry blossoms in sepia tone, Van Gogh chose a different backdrop, incorporating a decorative lily pond with koi fish, which was a common motif in Japanese prints. Vincent did fairly well in Paris at first, living with his brother up in Montmartre, meeting the many up-and-coming as well-established Impressionists, hobnobbing and partying. However, he soon understood that Paris was just a bit too stimulating for his mental health. One of the saddest things about his life is that he seems to have been aware of his mental problems and to have understood that for the most part, medical science of the day was unable to help him. Self-help it had to be. He was partying too much, smoking too much, drinking too much. It was Vincent's idea to leave Paris, perhaps to put those distractions behind himself. It was his idea to go to Arles, but his decision was strongly influenced by correspondence with his brother Theo. Vincent moved to Arles in February of 1888, seeking a change from the fast-paced life of Paris and hoping to find a brighter, more colorful landscape that would inspire him. He was also drawn to the idea of establishing an artist colony in the south of France, which later led to his attempt to form the Studio of the South. The idea here was that like-minded painters could live and work together, inspiring and supporting one another. He envisioned it as a kind of creative retreat, much like a European equivalent of the Japanese art colonies he admired, a kind of Provençal utopia. This self-portrait, done sometime between December 1887 and January 1888, shows us how Vincent saw himself. Vincent's time in Arles was incredibly productive, although he had to move at least twice before his complete mental breakdown in December. His first stop was a place called the Auberge Carrel, a hotel where he stayed when he first arrived in the city in February. The exact address of this establishment isn't documented, but it is believed to have been located a couple of blocks from the train station and a short walk from the riverside. Van Gogh didn't stay there very long. He apparently didn't find it welcoming or conducive to his work. He quickly moved on to the Café de Nuit, which was run by a family named Ginot. This cafe was more affordable and offered the kind of atmosphere he was looking for. It became a key part of his artistic life in the city. The owners described it as a night cafe, where penniless or near-penniless wanderers could find shelter during the night for the price of a single drink that they could nurse along, or where they could stay when they were too drunk to be admitted anyplace else. Vincent apparently spent a great deal of time here even after he moved into his famous yellow house. One of his paintings from this time features the lady of the house, who appears to be looking at some books, possibly wondering when her guest was going to finally pay his tab. Today, there's still a cafe on the same spot, although it's not the original building. It operates under the name Café Van Gogh and draws plenty of sightseers like me, but apparently not enough customers. The cafe has been rebuilt and significantly altered since Van Gogh's time. What we see here is a case of life following art rather than the other way around. I'm not sure how accurate those yellow tones are. In fact, no one really knows what those yellow colors looked like originally, so it's hard to say how close to the original the current look is to what Van Gogh actually saw. Vincent seemed relatively happy and hopeful during the early autumn of 18. He had found a suitable home for his studio of the South. He had made a side trip to another town and painted there. He had found furnishings for his studio, and his first guest, Paul Gauguin, was due to arrive that fall. Between February and September, he painted at least 100 canvases that we know of, including his famous series of sunflowers. Vincent painted Café de la Nuit in September 1888. After he had moved into his yellow house. If you compare it with a more recent photograph of the cafe, you can see not just how representational Vincent's work was. There was enough there for someone to be able to judge it and reproduce it, but also how carefully the current owners used the painting as a guide for the cafe's new design. Notice the stars above the arch in the background. Vincent wrote to his brother that he was grappling with how to present color in the night sky. I remember my high school friend explaining color theory somewhat exasperatedly to me. In terms of light and color theory, black is considered the absence of color. In that system, if there is no light, it results in black, meaning there's just no color at all. Contrary to what we often imagine, however, the night sky is never truly black, and Vincent was determined to show us that, but he was still working out how to capture that complexity in paint. Starry Night over the Rhone was painted from a spot just a minute or two's walk from the Yellow House, which Vincent was renting at the time. This spot, marked by a placard from the Arles Van Gogh circuit, offered a perfect view of the reflections of gas lamp in the shimmering blue water of the Rhone River. In the foreground, you can see two lovers strolling along the riverbank, while Vincent's stars glow on them, luminous, shining through a deep, velvety blue sky. Along the banks, houses radiate light that reflect in the water, adding to the mysterious atmosphere of the painting. He would paint another version of this after he moved to Saint Remy. The night cafe might have done as a place to live, but Vincent needed more than just a place to sleep. He needed a place to work, and he was expecting his friend Paul Gauguin to join him. Gauguin actually accepted financial support from Theo, Vincent's brother, to travel to Arles and stay with Vincent in 1888. Theo was a passionate supporter of both of them and their artistic ambitions, and provided assistance to Gauguin as well as to his brother. Theo's help allowed Gauguin to travel from Paris to Arles, where he joined Vincent in the hope of collaborating on their artistic project. A room or two above a night bar was simply not sufficient to fuel Vincent's dream of establishing an artist colony, or even welcoming a man he considered a kindred spirit as well as a friend. In May of 1888, he rented the Yellow House from the local authorities with the dreams of creating his artist community, with Paul as the first artist in residence. However, their time together ended in conflict, leading to Van Gogh's famous ear-slitting incident. Vincent wrote triumphantly to his brother, "Well, today I rented the right wing of this building," a sketch is enclosed, which is made up of 4 rooms, or rather 2 with 2 closets. It's painted yellow on the outside. Inside the walls are white, lime wall, and it faces the sun. I got it for a rent of 15 francs a month. Van Gogh's thinking went considerably further than just finding a dormitory room. This was going to be his utopia. He then went out and about and furnished it. He visited used furniture dealers and haggled for beds, chairs, table, lamp, mirrors, in short, everything his studio would need, all paid for by brother Theo. You can see the result of his shopping in this series of paintings. He even did portraits of 2 of the chairs he bought. One was specifically his chair on the left, and a second, possibly the more comfortable one, for Gauguin, shown here on the right. These paintings were made in late 1888. The tension between them was growing, and their differences became clear in these portraits, with the chairs serving as stand-ins for the 2 men. Van Gogh saw himself as grounded but emotional and honest, represented by a plain wooden chair. He saw Gauguin as more intellectual, reserved, and dramatic, represented by a more decorative chair in moody lighting. Shortly after these paintings, the relationship collapsed. The house was damaged during World War II and eventually was demolished in the mid-20th century. Today, it is remembered by a plaque commemorating the location, but no more. The relationship between Van Gogh and Gauguin was probably doomed to fail, and quickly became tense due to their very differing artistic visions and personalities. Van Gogh was spontaneous and emotionally driven, but somewhat needy, while Gauguin was structured and theoretical, and also dominating any relationship he was in. Van Gogh may have sought both companionship and approval from Gauguin, something which Gauguin could not provide, at least not for long. On December 23rd, they got into a fight. Was it about approach, style, personal differences? Did Gauguin threaten to leave Provence and return to Paris, the ultimate betrayal? Did Van Gogh threaten Gauguin with a razor knife? Was it all fueled by alcohol? We know both artists drank, with Van Gogh known for his heavy absinthe consumption, which probably made everything worse. Gauguin also drank, but was more controlled in this, as he seemed to have been in everything else in his life. We are unlikely to ever get the full story. We do know what happened after Gauguin stormed out, presumably to pack. Vincent took out a knife, sliced off part of his ear, and wrapped the severed piece in some cloth. He went to a local brothel and gave it to a woman named Rachel, reportedly telling her to keep this object carefully before he left. The next morning, they found him in his home, weak from blood loss and in a mentally disturbed state. The police and Dr. Felix Ray were summoned, and Van Gogh was taken to the hospital in Arles. Gauguin may not have planned to leave before or even during the argument, but after this incident, he did leave Arles immediately, feeling unsafe and unwilling to deal with Van Gogh's instability any longer, which is quite understandable. Van Gogh remained in the hospital for several weeks, suffering from hallucinations, paranoia, and memory loss. Van Gogh was never one to let any experience, even an awful one, go to waste. In addition to several portraits showing himself with a bandaged ear, he created the ward at the Hospital of Arles and the courtyard of the Hospital of Arles, along with a portrait of Dr. Ray, the physician who tended him and eventually arranged for his move into an insane asylum outside of Saint Remy. Van Gogh described Dr. Ray as brave, hardworking, and always helping people, and was grateful to him. In January of 1889, Van Gogh gave the portrait to him as a keepsake. There's an interesting story about it. Ray's mother reportedly thought it was hideous and used it to close up a hole in the family chicken coop. It was sold several times, eventually landing in the Pushkin Museum in 1946. By early 1889, Van Gogh's mental health had continued to deteriorate and was marked with intense emotional distress, violent outbursts, and periods of instability. Van Gogh knew and understood there was something terribly wrong. His behavior was increasingly erratic and actually frightened the people around him. His emotional volatility made him difficult to live with, and tensions with his landlord finally became too much. He was evicted. Shortly afterward, he moved to a mental institution just south of Saint-Remy-de-Provence. It was time for him to move on from Arles, and so it is for us. I came by my interest in Van Gogh a very long time, visiting the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. I was a pretty much half-broke college student looking for something free to do, and museums in Washington do not charge for entry. Since I got in for free, I thought I could splurge a couple of bucks. These are the first 2 Van Gogh prints I ever purchased. They were small, but reasonably good quality for the price in those long ago days. I still have them. Come back next time for another adventure with me, the Armchair Traveler, as your guide. Thank you for traveling with me today. This year, we'll be making a grand tour of France, not just the famous cities, although we'll hit them too, but some lesser known gems. The basis of all my French posts is my personal on-the-ground visits, extending over a period of more than half a century. I took a lot of pictures, I asked a lot of questions, and I tried to write down the answers. Things change, even in a puny human lifetime, and most French cities are considerably older than I am, so a great deal of research goes into each one of these presentations. Most of that work never makes it into the videos except as an incidental reference or a mention. You might wonder what happens to the rest of it. Well, I write it down, and sometimes, if it seems interesting enough, and I admit that is a matter of taste, I write it up and post it separately. If you want to know more, check the description box below. I'll put in links from time to time for more information. Sometimes this will be information I dug up, other times it'll be links to what I hope are honest, reputable sources. In addition, I have a travel blog, a health and wellness blog, because travel is easier if we're healthy, and can be found on Blue Sky and Facebook. The addresses are all to the side of this video. Finally, I have a favor to ask. If you enjoyed my post, please like, subscribe, and share. This will help my channel grow. Thank you, and keep on traveling.